Welcome to No Script, No Problem on Believe, the #1 podcast network for professionals. I'm your host, Steve Berkowitz. Coming up first on the show, I'm talking to documentary filmmaker Amy Nicholson about her new feature doc, Happy Campers, which chronicles the final days of a working-class waterfront Virginia trailer park that welcomes all with a smile. That is, all the way until developers come in and buy up the property. Plus, stick around after the interview. I'll talk Emmys, the start of the NFL season, and the beef between DirecTV and Disney. Okay, let's get to my chat with Amy Nicholson. She is a commercial director and a documentary filmmaker based in New York City. As an advertising creative director, she helmed campaigns for Got Milk and Nike. Happy Campers is her third feature documentary. It premiered at Doc NYC in 2023 and won a special jury award. You can watch it via video on demand anywhere, including Apple. As you will hear, Amy embedded with the residents of this community, and she tells a truly wonderful, heartfelt story. Beneath cliched trailer park stereotypes that we've all heard lies an unlikely utopia, where neighbors help each other and share everything from power tools to simple pleasures. But when their affordable paradise is sold to developers, the residents brace for eviction and the loss of friendships that span generations. They hold tight till their final days in the sun.
He told me he had a beach house.
It was a very nice beach house.
Down in Chincoteague. I was like, all right, we've got to go. And I grew up in New Jersey, down the Jersey Shore, so I had my hair done, my nails were done. I had all my Jersey Shore outfits ready to go. And as we're pulling into the campground, I'm thinking, well, where the hell am I?
Yeah, she had to stay in the car while I had to pull all the boards off the door to even get in.
It's like, oh my God, where am I? This is not a beach house.
Okay, enjoy the interview. Amy Nicholson, welcome to No Script, No Problem. Thanks for doing the show.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
The film is Happy Campers. Congratulations on the film. This is a really unique documentary. The way you came upon this trailer park, Inlet View in Virginia, is pretty remarkable because, a lot of people find stories, a lot of people option IP. It's not often that people embed themselves in an area, in a house, in a trailer park, and then decide to make a documentary about that group of people, that community. And when I read that, I was like, okay, I got to talk to Amy. So talk to me a little bit about this decision that you made, how you found Inlet View, how you found this trailer park and said, hey, you know what? I'm just going to live here. I'm just going to start filming. I was going to make a documentary.
Yes. Well, I grew up in Maryland, and Chincoteague Island is just one of those places you go, as kids, and it's kind of a family vacation place. It's very unique because unlike most of the East Coast, the beach is a national park. It's not, it's a barrier island. So it doesn't have the same, overdeveloped boardwalk and all of that stuff. It's very, very different. It's kind of a sleepy little fishing place. And it swells with, lots of visitors in the summer. And one of the things they have there are these family campgrounds. And there were 3 of them on the island. And I was always struck by just how compact they were. And I was taking pictures one day, and I was poking around in Inlet View in the winter. And I thought, wow, these are like the original tiny houses, only not Dwell magazine appropriate, And I was also taken by the fact that like most of them, had homemade decorations and add-ons, and they looked very cozy. They're all 10 feet apart. And, people put their names on the side of the house, like Mary and Joe's, come on in, have a seat at our tiki bar. And I just loved it. And I went back many, many years later and rented, they had these 3 sort of very rough cabins in the middle of the campground, and I rented one, and my husband and I stayed there for the last half of our first summer there, and it was amazing. It was just, the community was so open and friendly and fun. And we went to this big potluck thing at the end of the summer, and it was, I don't know, I just fell in love with it.
One of the things that kind of struck me just from the get-go is I think we have this image in our head of when we hear trailer park or camper, like we have this kind of image in our head that's very low class, right? And that's on us. It's not. It is so loving there. You paint this image, you create this image really of a community, people that love each other, that share things. Can you talk a little bit about the community of Inlet View, where you lived, and kind of how they welcomed you, what it was like to live there?
Well, thank you for noticing that we kind of leaned into those stereotypes that people have in their heads at the beginning of the film. And once I got to know my neighbors, you have to be very careful. You kind of want to be polite and say, but what did you think of the place when you first got here? And then, no problem people telling you exactly that, well, this place was a real, they had words for it. And they would say, like, oh, I would never bring, certain people in the family or certain friends here, but it was beloved. I mean, environmentally, it's just spectacular. It's at the end of the island. It was surrounded on three sides by water. So most people had a waterfront spot. And there were dolphins leaping, right in front of your house. It was really special. But I will tell you that, it was more than life-changing for me because, I went in there thinking, well, I just want to know what this is like. And maybe there's a film in here about community because, everyone's so tight knit. But what I found was so much more than what I thought it was. And it had a very profound effect on me. So I went back after living there for 3 years. We were thrown into the COVID, lockdown in 2020. And that's when I really started to realize what was there. I'll give you one anecdote about how welcoming the community is. So the first summer we spent in the cabin, and I hadn't bought the trailer yet. And, it rained one night and it was kind of a storm, and then the storm cleared up. And I thought, well, I really need to meet some people. So I'll just go down the road and, poured myself a little red cup of, wine. And I thought, I'll just wander around. And I went around this one corner, and there was this whole group of people in a tiny little yard with a white picket fence around it, watching the sunset. And they said, well, who are you? And I thought, oh, wow, I really overstepped my boundaries. And they wanted to know because they wanted to invite me in. And, that's the difference between, the normal world that we live in and a community like that, where it's expected that if there's someone new, you're going to be there. You're part of us now. So it was really great.
How long did you live there? How long did you film?
I lived there for a total of 3 summers. I went down a couple times in the winter too, but there were very few residents that stayed all year. There were some, but very few. But mostly it was like, I would say March to November was kind of the season there. And I started filming on the 3rd summer, and it wasn't long into my filming that we all found out that we were not going to have the campground anymore. So then I started filming in earnest. At first I was just like, oh, I'll film a little and see how it goes. And, maybe next summer I'll film a little bit more. But when I found out it was not going to be a next summer, I really started to interview people. And I was out every day with I had a garden cart, and I would wheel it around with all my stuff in it. And I met so many people the 2nd summer because I was taking photographs of them, but I met even more the 3rd summer. And then it was really heartbroken because then I knew everybody,
Right. And that is the crux of the documentary, is all these people have fallen in love with this location along the water. They know each other, they love it. And now developers are coming in, they're going to tear it all down and build new buildings or homes, or what is going to go there?
Well, it's already there. And it's a glamping site. So this is happening all over to these mom and pop campgrounds, which, are a little more, I would say, eclectic. They tend to have, older campers, newer campers, all kinds of campers, some permanent, some not. And they're all up and down the East Coast. It's not just this one place in Chincoteague. Actually, there were several people in our campground who had been kicked out of other campgrounds by the same developer. And what they do is they come in and they essentially turn it into a hotel. They partner with a mobile home manufacturer. In this case, it's Sun Communities. So it's Sun Mobile Home Manufacturing has a division called Sun Communities. And they flip it over to Sun Communities, and Sun Communities runs it like a hotel. So they take everything out, they clear the property, they bulldoze everything, and then they put in these things that are they kind of look like somewhere between like a tiny house and a cabin. And sometimes they'll do like this sort of, nice tents. They'll do those, and they'll leave some spaces for RVs, but pretty much they're operating like a hotel.
And I'm going to guess the price is skyrocketed. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. You would guess right. Yeah, it's a lot more expensive. So they get they get a clientele that wants Wi-Fi and air conditioning, and they're not going to have we had a cooler on our porch with beer in it at all times, and we just would change the ice. And that doesn't happen in places like that. You go to a bar. If you want to make a s'more, you have there's a kit at the general store. It's all very corporate and branded and served to you on a stick, but not on old marshmallow stick.
The film kind of paints this collision of almost like 70s hippie, love and freedom and family versus modern capitalism. You were there. You're in it. How are you feeling knowing that this is happening? You're not just the kind of objective observer filmmaker. You're literally part of the story. What was that like?
It was really hard, especially because I was trying to capture as much of the magic that was there before we had to leave. And meanwhile, my husband is, taking apart our deck and packing things. And it was also just heartbreaking. I always say I would give the film back to have the place back, because the people were so fun and great. And I never felt more relaxed and free in that environment. That it's hard to explain, until you go there. And then people would describe it as like, ah, and then they would say, oh yeah, when you hit the causeway, you just start to relax. There's something about it. And it wasn't just because it, was kind of beachy and summery. That was part of it. Of course, the environment was beautiful, and being on the water is, a very relaxing experience. But it was bigger than that. It was more that you could just feel comfortable being yourself, and you never had to think about just, is somebody judging me for what I have or what I don't have, or there's been a lot of commentary about politics in the film. Oh, you must have cut all the politics out. I'm like, no, politics was never discussed. And this was 2019. It was a year before the election. So it just wasn't it's not important in that environment. So yeah, so it was very, very difficult to be part of my own story in a way. Yeah.
In thinking about the style of the film, there were long portions of kind of beauties or montages where you just kind of let the edit play, whether it was there was like a rock and roll kind of party montage that was kind of fun. There were times where you would just kind of let the beauties of the park kind of play that I thought were kind of fun, with just kind of like natural sound going in the background, no sound bites or anything. Can you tell me a little bit about the style of the film, what you wanted to portray, what you wanted to bring from a stylistic standpoint?
Well, some of it was driven by just the shooting style. And then the shooting style started to dictate this very it's not non-linear. It's just definitely not a traditional structure. And it was born out of the fact that I wanted the film to feel like what it was like to be there. So, for instance, we shot drone shots, we shot driving shots through the town. We had other film, but we decided that it was a very insulated place, and once you were in there, you were kind of in, and you were in your own bubble. So we threw away anything that didn't take place like immediately in the place. And then we also, because the way I shot it was like I would just go out with my garden cart in the morning, and when I saw something great, somebody was fishing or a family having dinner or the grandma who was barbecuing with her grandson, and then he gave me the tour of her camper. That was all very spontaneous. I just happened to, meet up with them, and I had met her, but I had never met her grandson. So I said, "Oh, introduce me to your grandson." And they were making hot dogs on the grill. And then he said, "Oh, would you like to see inside?" And I said, "Well, of course." So it was very much this feeling of like wandering from place to place and overhearing conversations, and just meeting people where they are. And I wanted it to feel that way. It was a very, very difficult thing to edit because we had time of day to think about. We tried making it a mixed time of day thing. That didn't work. It was too much for people to wrap their head around. So we came up with the loose structure of, sun up to sundown 3 times. And we stuck with that. But then after that, it was really a matter of figuring out how to keep the feeling of wandering and meeting people without making it seem scattershot.
For a lot of people, embedding can mean different things. A lot of times it's something's happening, I'm there, I pick up my camera and I go. For you living there, I'm sure in your mind, you really had to structure your days in a certain way. So how did you go about, saying, okay, today I want to get this, or today I want to interview this person, my neighbor or my neighbor's neighbor, or how did you figure out what you were going to film on a day-to-day basis? I'm sure if you wanted to film 10 hours a day, you probably could have, but you would have killed yourself in the edit. So how did you kind of structure the production on a day-to-day basis?
Well, there's several answers to that question. So the first thing is I would say that the filming was really dictated by the community. It was dictated by the whims of the weather, first of all, because if it was bad weather, there wouldn't be a lot of people there. And, you kind of wanted to, go out and film when you had the most opportunity to catch something great. So the big weekends were key, the big weekends, July 4th and, Memorial Day, Labor Day, those were key kind of tentpole weekends for me. The other thing I did was I shot because I didn't have lighting and I wanted it to look as beautiful as it was in person. I had a whiteboard in my camper and it had several things. It had names of people that I wanted to remember because as I would go around, I would realize that the campground was divided into sections. And there were certain people who were kind of like the king of that section. And those were the most talkative people. And they tended to be the people that were there the longest and the people that had the most passion about the campground. So I gravitated toward them. And then I would, sort of tick them off one by one, trying to, get them to sit and talk with me, which, an interview is a really sort of personal and it's a thing. It's a thing to find a quiet spot in the campground. It's a thing to get them to take the time, especially if they're busy, we don't want to hit traffic. We got to go home, so there's a lot to that. But I kept a list of names of people that I'd met that I thought, oh, they would be good. And then I also had sunrise and sunset every single day. And, in the beginning of the summer, I was getting up at like 4 a.m. It was really pretty brutal, but there was something really lovely about that time too, because the fishermen were out and the kids were out, but nobody else was out. And so there were different moods for different times of day. And once I got the rhythm of that, I leaned into it a little bit so that I could get the prettiest footage. And dinners were always a big time for me because it was so beautiful to have people all sitting around a picnic table together, having dinner. just hanging out, talking about nothing, maybe having a cocktail, maybe starting a fire, so I spent a lot of time on the beginning and the end of the day, usually.
I have to ask you about financing because I'm sure at the beginning, at least, you didn't really know what you had, right? And then I'm sure once you found out, and much to your dismay, that the developers were coming in, they were going to turn this into some glamping site. You knew, okay, this is going to be a pretty dramatic story with a lot of emotion. Was it at that point that then you started to put together a pitch? And then you started to go out to investors. Talk to me a little bit about how you ended up financing the film.
I bought my own equipment and I knew I had to film by myself. There was no taking in a crew. And I have a wonderful set of guys that I've filmed pretty much every film with that are amazing. Jerry Resius, who's a brilliant, documentary DP, also a filmmaker in his own right, great sound people. It was hard to make that decision, but I knew it wouldn't be the same. I knew that it would change the perspective of what you felt when you watched it. So that was first. So I bought my own kit, and it was very modest, but I had really good sound. I got a lot of advice from some great guys I've worked with, and I practiced as much as I could before I started filming. So that part cameras are cheap these days, and you can do it pretty small if you're willing to have a little bit of inconvenience. So I kept it as small as possible, and I bought a camper, so I paid money for that. So I would say, like, all told, my like on the ground production expenses out of pocket to get enough film to make a motion picture were very, very reasonable. But then you get to editing, and you get to, you want a great composer, and you want amazing sound design because that's 90% of the experience of being there. And we wanted a song from Bread over the credits, and all of that costs a substantial amount of money. It was a very modest budget compared to some documentaries. I would say it was average for the small production. I would say it was average. It was really difficult to get funding because by then the election had happened. COVID had happened. It was really, really hard. It was really hard. I think that the country is so divided, and I don't like to think that people who are in charge of granting bring their own politics to the situation, but they do. And I applied for money for 3 years, and Catapult was the most supportive and wonderful organization. They gave me money in the beginning, and they gave me money in the end when I had no money left to color my film. But in the middle was pretty much me. It was pretty much me. And I finished the film with my own dollars because I just thought I have to pay homage to those people who made my life so much better. And I thought the message of the film was important enough. But yeah, it was really, really hard to get money.
The film isn't political. That's interesting that you say that.
I know.
It's not.
I know. Ironically, yes, it's not political.
Yeah. I mean, I'll respond to the financial situation because I'm in the midst of trying to get finances for my documentary, and I'm having a miserable time. So I can relate to that. However, you are a much more experienced filmmaker than I am. And the fact that you made yourself part of this, you were part of the story, that to me is everything that all the grants are asking for. It's right.
I know. I had no problem. Yeah, I'm sure you've come across, Steve, those questions that are like, well, how do you have access, and how are you protecting your protagonists? And I just said, I lived there. That literally was my 3-word answer. Yeah, I think 2 things hurt me. I think, first of all, the subject matter is subtle, and the people in it, you have to have empathy for all people if you're going to have empathy for those people. And I'm not so sure that's the way of the world right now. So, going back to, people bring their own politics to a situation, they make assumptions. I think there were a lot of assumptions made that were wrong. I'm not a Trumper. My neighbors weren't. The people 3 doors down weren't. There were lots of liberals. There were a lot of environmentalists. There were a lot. The people, they were really lovely and very open and very non-judgy. So it kind of broke my heart a little bit that I felt like they were being judged sometimes. So I think that helped, that hurt a little bit. I think the two bigger issues though were, number one, I was not doing some salacious social justice impact film. Like, I'm not out to, change abortion rights or, address immigration or get people to, recycle more. I'm not trying to do that. That is not what this film is about. The film is about introducing you to a place that you would probably never know about and people that you would probably never meet, because they will change your life the way they changed mine. That is the purpose of this film. And that's a much more subtle approach than most documentaries. And then you get into structurally, I can't tell you how many times I was asked, well, you're just going to eliminate all these people and you're going to have like one or two that represent the community. And I just thought, wow, that's not right. The community works as a group. They're a whole, and that's how they see themselves. So me doing that would misrepresent them. So I chose not to, but I fought that a lot of the way. And I also fought like, aren't you going to explain everything? Aren't you going to put supers up? Aren't you going to put lower thirds that tell me where we are and what we're doing there and what the purpose of it is? And aren't you going to make this big inciting incident that has to be resolved? And it just wasn't that kind of story. So we stuck to our guns and we got it done. And I'm so proud of it. And I'm so happy we did. But it hurt us because it was, and I feel for the people who read the grants, they get thousands of applications and they have to go through them quickly. But there's not a lot of room for a film where you have to watch from the very beginning to the very end in order to see the trajectory of the emotional journey and also the bigger point of the film.
Look, I applaud you, and I'm so glad you were able to get it made.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you want people watching this to kind of take away from the film?
Well, I kind of, I usually, because as my husband reminds me, I'm always a little too subtle. So I try not to, hit people over the head with it. But I'll tell you something that Tammy said. Tammy is the lady in the beginning who lights a cigarette while she's riding the bicycle, which takes some talent. And she also is feeding, she fed a lot of the cats in the campground. There were lots of feral cats and she took care of them. And she's just salt of the earth. So great. And I did, much longer interview, you see just bits and pieces in the film and we really pared it down. But I did much longer interviews with everyone and they said the most amazing things about the community. I just didn't want to tell people what they were supposed to think, even if it came from the mouth of the person who, was speaking and living it and the community itself. So we did cut a lot of it out, but Tammy and I talked for quite some time. And one of the things that she said was we were talking about money and, people with money and people without money. And we were really into this. I mean, I almost forgot we were filming because we were really into this big philosophical discussion. And she said, I just, when I see when people, get so caught up in like, you have to have this car and this house and this thing, and you have to live in this place and you have to have, a swimming pool and whatever, and just all the stuff that people have now and all the keeping up with the technology and keeping up with the Joneses, that's what they say, right? And she said, you don't need all that. And I just thought, wow, that was just like, that should be the tagline of the film. You don't need all that, because, when you realize that just spending time with people that are friendly and people that make you feel welcome. And when you just sit and watch the sunset and just, sit around a fire because it smells good and you just have a great day like that and there's no pressure on you, it's like there is no value you can place on that. It is priceless. So I hope especially in the world where everything comes, in an Amazon box through the front door, and everything gets, I know in New York, everything gets delivered, everything is delivered. And it has become a very much of like haves and have not society. And I feel like we've lost the community part and the be nice to your neighbors part, and how great that can feel in life. And so I hope it serves as a huge reminder.
Amy, this is your third feature. You've also done 2 shorts. So for young, aspiring filmmakers, what advice do you have for folks?
I'm going to give advice that Cynthia Wade, who is a very accomplished uh, filmmaker and documentarian, and I took classes with her, and she actually did our Q&A last night here in LA. She gave me the best advice of all. I will never forget it. I was taking a class of hers when I was really just starting out, and I had no idea what I was doing. And, in her class, she said, make sure you really love what you're making the film about, because it is always a million times more work and effort and energy than you think. And at some point, you're just gonna hate what you're doing. But if you love the film and you love the people in the film or the subject of the film, could be animals, could be anything. If you love it, you will keep going in those dark hours. And nothing could be more true. And that has happened to me on every film, on every single film. I have reached a point where I'm like, it's not worth it. I'm never going to do this again. you know, and then, I go, oh, but I love this and I want this to be a thing out in the world. And then you keep going. Make sure you love it.
I think that's good advice. All right, so where can people see Happy Campers?
It's going on Apple September 10th.
Terrific. Amy Nicholson, thank you for doing No Script, No Problem.
Oh, Steve, thank you so much.
Thanks again to Amy Nicholson. You can watch her film Happy Campers anywhere you get video on demand. Okay, time for your reality check. First up, the Emmys are tonight, where we will confirm that The Bear is not a comedy, and yet it will most likely win Best Comedy. I voted for Curb Your Enthusiasm, but good money is on The Bear. As for the drama category, Shogun is expected to clean up not just Best Drama, but a lot of the drama categories. They've already won 14 Creative Arts Emmys. Speaking of those Creative Arts Emmys, congratulations to my friends at Shark Tank, who won Best Structured Reality Show last weekend. Additionally, props to the folks at Love on the Spectrum, who won Best Unstructured Reality Show, as well as the team at Jeopardy, who won Best Game Show. Now, in terms of the Best Nonfiction Series, Mary Richardson and Emma Schwartz did not pick up that with Quiet on Set. They were on the last episode of No Script, No Problem. Instead, it went to Beckham, which wasn't bad, but I never like when the celebrity vanity doc gets the Emmy. Would have rather seen it gone to Mary and Emma with Quiet on Set. Moving on. Movie fans, you may not know this, but the Sundance Film Festival could be moving away from Park City, Utah in 2027. Now, I stress the words could be. All right, it's been in Utah since 1978 and Park City since 1981, but in 2027, it may be moving due to contract issues and some of the locals not being happy with what Sundance has turned into in terms of being a spectacle and influencers coming in and just really becoming kind of a party more than just a independent film festival. There are 3 finalists for the new Sundance Film Festival, where it could end up: Boulder, Colorado, my hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio, and it could stay in Park City. Now, I know some folks in Cincinnati who are working to get Sundance there, and I understand that it is a legitimate chance. However, some folks think that this is just a negotiating ploy and that it will end up in Park City. I will hold out hope that Cincinnati gets Sundance. It would be a huge coup for my hometown and really put it on the map from a film perspective, but we shall see. Speaking of Ohio, I want to confirm there are no people eating dogs in Springfield, Ohio, or anywhere in Ohio. So just want to make that clear. All right. The NFL season is well underway. We're on week 2 here, and already my fantasy football team is in shambles. Christian McCaffrey, my top pick, is out for at least 6 weeks. Come on, man. You're killing me. But everybody is watching. The NFL averaged 21 million viewers per game in the opening week. That makes it the most watched week 1 on record. All told, 123 million people saw at least part of one game in week 1. Wow, a lot of folks watching the NFL, and that is even with Tua going down with yet another concussion. Got to worry about that. So we've seen a huge rebound in the popularity of the NFL since when we had that kind of controversy, if you will, back in 2018. So NFL is back, baby. I'm very curious to see what the numbers will look like for those 2 Christmas Day games on Netflix, because that will really be telling in terms of what Netflix's plans are with the NFL and with live sports in general. Okay, finally, after a 2-week blackout of all Disney channels, including ABC and ESPN, Disney and DirecTV have a deal in principle, which allowed college football fans yesterday to watch all the action on ESPN and ABC. Viewers will now be able to watch the Emmys tonight on ABC and Monday Night Football, of course. Talks between the companies had broken down on September 1st, but yes, a new deal that includes streaming and genre-based bundles was able to be reached, similar to what happened last year with Charter. I don't know why they didn't just make the deal. We all knew this was going to happen. The agreed upon points include the opportunity to offer DirecTV customers genre-specific bundles, sports, entertainment, kids, and family, which also incorporate Disney's linear networks as well as the streamers, Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus, which is exactly what DirecTV wanted. They wanted to give that flexibility to their customers. Disney Plus, Hulu, ESPN Plus will be included in select DirecTV packages and made available individually as well. DirecTV will also have continued carriage at market-based terms of Disney's entertainment, sports, and news programming, including the ABC-owned television stations, the ESPN networks, the Disney-branded channels Freeform, the FX networks, and the National Geographic channels. This deal appears to be a winner for both sides. For DirecTV, it allows more flexibility to their customers with skinnier bundles based on genre and access to streamers. And for Disney, they get to expand the reach of their streamers. But we shall see how many subscribers left DirecTV due to the blackout. All right, that's going to do it for another episode of No Script, No Problem. If you enjoyed the show, please remember to subscribe, download, and rate it with 5 stars. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Podcasts, Stitcher, and TuneIn. You can also find it at Believe.com and at Believe Podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Steve Berkowitz, or on Threads or Instagram at Steve M. Berkowitz. You can also send any questions you have to No Script, No Problem Podcast at gmail.com. If you're interested in advertising on the show, please contact Believe at Believe.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Steve Berkowitz for No Script, No Problem.